If you're a millennial, you've likely spent your adult life living in a state of financial subtraction. For most of us, the starting line of adulthood wasn't zero, it was a deep, dark hole in the ground lined with tuition bills and high-interest credit cards. We were told that debt was a tool, and I will admit, with the right knowledge, debt can be used for major financial moves, but for many who never learned about how to use debt properly, it turned into a set of handcuffs. I spent 15 years as a senior designer and art director. I've worked on global campaigns for Marvel, Pokemon, Microsoft, and many other global brands. On paper, I was successful, but for a long time my bank account didn't reflect that. I was making good money, but living a negative net worth life. I was one of those professionals who looked like they had it all figured out while secretly stressing over a $100 unexpected car repair. As of 2026, the average millennial is carrying over $132,000 in total debt. That is a staggering weight to carry while trying to build a career, a family, or a future. I realized that if I wanted to be truly free, not just career free, but life free, I had to treat my debt like a design problem that needed a radical solution. This video is a blueprint of how I went from drowning in debt to being 100% financially free. We're going to look at the analytics of the debt snowball versus the avalanche, the psychology of lifestyle deflation, and the exact numbers I use to buy back my freedom. Whether you're a designer like me or you're in an entirely different field, the math is the same. The first step to getting out of debt is the most painful. You have to look at it. Most people treat their debt like a horror movie. They know it's there, but they keep their eyes covered during the scary part. It's the whole idea that if I can't see it, it doesn't exist. But you cannot fix what you refuse to measure. As a designer, I'm used to doing a project audit before I start a new campaign, so for my finances, I had to do a life audit. I sat down and listed every single cent I owed. I didn't just look at the balance, I looked at the annual percentage rate or APR and the minimum monthly payment. At my peak, I was looking at a mix of student loans, a car loan, and the silent killer, credit card debt. The credit cards were sitting at 24% APR. That's not a loan, that's a legal mugging. If you have $10,000 in credit card debt at 24%, you're paying $2,400 a year just for the privilege of owing them money. That's $200 a month that vanishes into the ether before you even touch the principal. The data for 2026 shows that the credit card balances for millennials are rising at a double-digit annual rate. We're using high-interest debt to bridge the gap between our stagnant wages and the rising cost of, well, everything. I realized that my decent salary was just passing through my hands like water. I wasn't an art director, I was a highly paid middleman for the banks. The first principle, regardless of your job, is to find your net cash flow. This is what's left after your must-haves, like rent, utilities, basic food, are paid. If your net cash flow is $500 and your interest charges are $400, you're only making $100 of progress a month. You aren't swimming, you're treading water in a lead suit. Once I saw my net cash flow number, the humor died and the resolve set in. It was time to stop being a victim of my own spreadsheet. Once you have your inventory, you need a strategy. There are two main schools of thought, the debt snowball and the debt avalanche. The avalanche is a choice of the rational robot. You list your debts by interest rate and attack the highest APR first. Mathematically, this saves you the most money. If you have a $5,000 credit card at 24% and a $20,000 student loan at 5%, the avalanche says I should ignore the student loan and just crush the credit card. The snowball, on the other hand, is a choice of the psychological human. You list your debts by balance and attack the smallest one first, regardless of the interest rate. You want that quick win. You want to see an account balance hit zero so your brain gets a little hit of dopamine. In my design work, I know that momentum is everything. If a project feels too big, the team gets burnt out. So I used a hybrid approach. I used the avalanche for my high interest credit cards because the 24% interest was an emergency. But once those were gone, I switched to the snowball for my smaller loans to maintain my sanity. The analytics on debt repayment show that the snowball is actually more effective for most people because behavioral consistency beats mathematical efficiency 90% of the time. If you choose the avalanche but quit after 6 months because you haven't felt the progress, you've lost. If you choose a snowball and it keeps you motivated for 3 years, you win. I started by taking every bonus from my art director roles and every side hustle dollar and throwing it at the smallest balance. I didn't buy a new laptop, I didn't upgrade my car, but I watched a $2,000 medical bill vanish, then a $5,000 personal loan, then a credit card got zeroed out. Every time a payment disappeared, that minimum monthly payment was added to the next attack fund. My Snowball started at $200 a month and eventually became a $3,000 a month juggernaut. And I know it's hard enough finding $200 a month, much less $3,000 to put towards your Snowball, but it's possible, especially if you do a lifestyle deflation. This is the part that most people hate. To get out of debt quickly, you have to kill your ego. As an art director, my ego was tied to my surroundings. I felt I deserved a certain level of aesthetic and comfort because of my 15 years of hard work. I deserved the $7 coffee, the $150 dinners, the newest MacBook Pro Ultra Max Megazord every year, and the $3,000 sofa. But I realized that deserving is a marketing term used to keep people in debt. I decided to undergo lifestyle deflation. I looked at my expenses and asked, is this item more important than my freedom? Usually the answer was no. I cut my spending to the bone, not because I was poor, but because I was weaponizing my income. The data shows that the average millennial spends roughly 30 to 40% of their income on wants. If you can temporarily drop that to 10%, you can increase your debt repayment speed by 300%. I stopped performing success. I drove my old car with pride, and still do. It's 16 years old now, and I ate the same 3 boring meals. I became a disciplined financial minimalist. This is applicable to any field. If you're a nurse, a teacher, a programmer, your ego spend is likely your biggest leak. We live in a K-shaped economy where the middle class is being hollowed out, but we're still trying to dress like the upper arm of that K. I decided to live like the lower arm while earning like the upper arm. I found a weird joy in how little I could spend. It became a fun game actually. Could I go a whole week without spending a single dollar outside of groceries? When you stop caring about the optics of your life, you suddenly have a massive amount to throw at your debt. My salary became a flamethrower directed at my biggest debt, student loans. But I know you can only cut so much. Eventually you hit a floor where you need to eat and keep the lights on. That's when you pivot to income scaling. As a senior designer, I have a high value skill, and I knew that I could sell my time for a premium on the side. But even if you aren't a designer, you have latent value in your professional experience. I started taking on high-ticket freelance projects, the kind of work that paid $5,000 to $10,000 for a weekend of intense strategy. I even started teaching on Skillshare to create passive income out of the knowledge I already had. That grew to over 20,000 students and became a great return on invested time. Pro tip, I highly recommend you teach what you're an expert at. I didn't use any of this extra money to reward myself. I didn't see a single cent of it in my lifestyle. Every dollar of side income went directly to the principal of my largest remaining debt, student loans. The analytics of wealth building show that earned income is your most powerful tool, but it's also the most heavily taxed. By funneling side hustle money directly into debt, you're effectively getting an immediate return equal to the interest rate you're avoiding. If I pay off a 7% student loan, that's a guaranteed 7% return on my money. In a volatile market, that's the best investment on earth. If you're in a different field, this might mean picking up extra shifts, getting a certification that leads to a $10,000 raise, or fractionalizing your expertise as a consultant. The goal is to create a burst of income. My personal goal was to have at least 2 or 3 income bursts a year. These weren't for living, they were for eliminating specific debt accounts. I remember the day I finished a massive project for a client and received a $15,000 check. Old me would have looked at a new camera or a vacation to Vietnam, but new me sat in my home office, logged into my student loan portal, and watched the balance drop from $45,000 to $30,000 in one click. That feeling of power is infinitely better than the feeling of buying. It was the first time in 15 years I felt like I was winning. There's a moment in the debt-free journey called the freedom threshold. This is the point where your debt is low enough and your gap, so the difference between earnings and spending, is high enough that your net worth starts to move into the positive. For me, this happened about 2 years into my aggressive plan. Once the high interest debt was gone, the math shifted in my favor. I wasn't just paying back the past, I was funding the future. The $3,000 a month I had been throwing at banks was now mine. As a millennial, having $3,000 of unallocated cash every month feels like a superpower. It gives you the FU mobility that I talked about in a previous video. The data shows that once a household becomes debt-free, excluding the mortgage, their stress levels drop by over 40% and their career risk tolerance increases. I noticed this in my art direction work. I stopped being afraid of losing a client or job. Because I had no debt and a growing cash cushion, I could negotiate harder. I could say no to bad projects. Ironically, being debt-free made me better at my job because I wasn't working out of desperation. This is the relatable factor that I want to emphasize. Financial freedom isn't about being a millionaire. It's about removing the leverage that others have over you. When you owe someone money, they own a piece of your time and your peace of mind. When you owe nothing, you're the sole owner of your 24 hours. Whether you're an art director or an accountant, that feeling of total ownership is the ultimate luxury. I reached total freedom on a random Tuesday. There was no parade, there was no gold watch, there was just a quiet realization that I no longer worked for the banks. I worked for myself. I logged into my accounts, saw $0 across the board, and went back to work. But this time, I was keeping 100% of the money I was working for. I have another video about how designers and millennials can become millionaires, and I walk through the exact roadmap that I'm on to achieve that myself. Becoming debt-free is one of those steps, and after that, that's when the real wealth building starts to happen through investing, real estate. Things get really interesting after you put in the discipline to get to that point. So that's the blueprint. It isn't a secret. It's a series of rather boring, very disciplined mathematical decisions. It's an inventory, a strategy, a lifestyle deflation, and an income scale. It took me 15 years to build the career that gave me the fuel, but it only took 3 years of focus to clear the debt. And while I won't disclose my exact financial documents, I will say that these methods allowed me to eliminate well over $60,000 of debt. If you're a millennial feeling buried by the $1.7 trillion student debt crisis or the rising cost of credit, I want you to know that the system is designed to keep you in that hole. It relies on your ego and your desire for normalcy to keep you paying interest. But you don't have to be normal. You can be the designer of your own escape. My career as a senior designer and art director gave me the tools to visualize a better future, but it was the boring math that actually built it. You don't need a design degree or finance degree to do this. You just need a spreadsheet, a slight sense of humor about your current situation, and the resolve to stop trading your future for a deserving present. The millionaire designer path I'm on now is only possible because I cleared the debt first. You can't build a skyscraper on a foundation of sand and IOUs. Clear the land, dig the foundation, and then start building something that no one can take away from you. Thank you for watching this video. If you're in the middle of your own debt attack, tell me, which method are you using, Snowball or Avalanche? I'm curious to hear about it in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe because I've got some more videos coming really soon. And if you have any specific topic you'd like to hear me cover, drop it down below and I'll do my best to make it happen. Now, let's get to work.